My Catholic Faith, Lesson 170, Impediments to Matrimony. This table shows the line and degree of relationship in connection with the person to be married, John or Mary. In the direct line, represented by the vertical rectangles, are all persons descended from or from whom descended the persons to be married, grandson, father, etc. In the collateral line, represented by the horizontal rectangles to right and left of the direct line, all other relatives belong, as cousins, uncles, etc. The degrees of relationship are indicated by the numbers. For instance, a niece is in the second degree collateral, a grandson in the second degree direct, etc. What are the impediments to matrimony? Impediments to matrimony are obstacles to the validity or lawfulness of a marriage. Impediments to matrimony are certain restrictions imposed by the law of God or of the Church which render a marriage contract invalid or unlawful if such restrictions are violated when entering into the marriage. Such obstacles are called impediments. Whenever circumstances incompatible with the sacrament or contract of matrimony exist, the Church has established impediments for the welfare of society and the protection of the matrimonial bond. When impediments exist, the Church either completely forbids the administration of the sacrament or requires special assurances that the dangers may be reduced as far as possible. In this latter case, a matrimonial dispensation is granted. Non-Catholics can marry validly among themselves since the Church enforces its laws only among those under its care. If baptized non-Catholics marry validly, their marriage cannot be dissolved. Two kinds of impediments. DIRIMENT, also called annulling or nullifying impediments, render an attempted marriage altogether null and void, invalid. Dispensations are only rarely granted for diriment impediments. Should an attempt at marriage be made without dispensation, there is no marriage. Such an invalid marriage must be either dissolved or the impediment removed by a dispensation and the marriage performed validly. If a marriage is dissolved, the contracting parties are free to marry other partners if they so wish. Prohibitive, also called impediment or hindering impediments, render a marriage unlawful, illicit, but valid. The marriage cannot be dissolved. It is important to distinguish illicit from invalid. Diriment impediments make an attempted marriage invalid, of no effect, not true, in short, no marriage. Prohibitive impediments make a marriage illicit, unlawful, forbidden, but it is valid, a true marriage, and cannot be dissolved. As an example of the difference between invalid and illicit, except in case of necessity, a Catholic layperson is forbidden to baptize a baby. If he does so, the baptism is illicit, but it is valid, and the baby is truly baptized. The chief diriment impediments are an existing marriage. One who is already married cannot marry again while the other party is still living. This impediment is never given a dispensation. Should someone believe his spouse dead, contract another marriage, he must immediately leave the second spouse if the first be discovered living. Coercion. In marriage, the contracting parties must give their consent freely. If either party is forced to marry against his will through abduction, violence, fear, etc., the impediment is annulling and there is no marriage. Parents and others who use coercion to force someone into a marriage against his will are grievously guilty before God. However, the marriage is valid if, in spite of his dislike for the other party, a person freely consents to marry for other motives. Lack of age. Boys under 16 and girls under 14 cannot enter into marriage. We are bound to obey civil or just laws. Legal age is considered one if above the canonical age. Blood relationship or consanguinity. The Church forbids the marriage of close relatives in order to enforce the respect due to blood relations and to prevent the birth of physically and mentally defective children often found resulting from such marriages. Close affinity. This means relationship by marriage. The survivor cannot marry the blood relations of his dead spouse. In the direct line, as a stepdaughter or mother-in-law, no dispensation is granted. In the correct collateral line, the impediment extends to the second degree and may be dispensed. Holy orders or solemn vows. Men who have received major orders, monks and nuns who have taken a solemn vow of chastity cannot contract a valid marriage. Disparity of worship. This is marriage between a Catholic and an unbaptized person. If a Catholic attempts to marry an unbaptized person without a dispensation, his marriage is null. Examples of the unbaptized are Hindus, Mohammedans, Jews, Buddhists, Shintoists. Spiritual affinity. Without dispensation, sponsors in baptism cannot marry their godchildren. A lay person cannot marry the person to whom he administered lay baptism. Legal relationship. Those who by civil law are incapable of contracting marriage by reason of a legal relation arising from adoption are incapable by church law of a valid marriage. This impediment partakes of the nature of the civil impediment which conditions it. It is prohibitive, where the civil impediment is prohibitive, and diriment or annulling, where the civil impediment is diriment. Other impediments. There are other impediments which those who wish to get married should know. They should inquire from their pastors or confessors about these. Among other diriment impediments are crime, error, impotency, public propriety, imbecility, and clandestinity. The chief prohibitive impediments: forbidden times, simple vows. Simple vows of virginity, chastity, or celibacy, a vow to enter a religious order or become a priest, are impediments. Mixed religion. The marriage of a Catholic to a baptized non-Catholic is a prohibitive impediment which without dispensation renders the marriage valid but illicit, unlawful. Such a marriage, being valid, cannot be dissolved. For example, without a dispensation, a Catholic man marrying a baptized non-Catholic, such as a member of the Orthodox Church, before his parish priest contracts a valid but illicit marriage. Being valid, his marriage cannot be dissolved, but to make the marriage lawful and not a sin, a dispensation must be secured. This kind of marriage must be clearly distinguished from disparity of worship, which is a diriment impediment, making an attempted marriage void.